First of all, I want to send my personal thanks to SIDA and all the organisers of this EGEA conference, which has been fantastic over the last 3 days. And I also want to thank in advance my co-chair, Philip James, and all the participants, because I'm one of those people that found that I've got to actually leave halfway through the session. But I hope you will all stay and listen to this going to be this very animated discussion. This session, a lot of this conference has been focusing on individuals, consumer behaviour, and individual behaviour change. And this session is meant to bring together various stakeholders, medical professionals, those from economics, food production, with policymakers to discuss a more broader consideration of determinants of fruit and vegetable consumption, and considering how all the stakeholders can come together to change fruit and vegetable consumption, not just in Europe, but worldwide. So we want to focus on how to increase fruit and vegetable intake, but not just for health, but for environmental and economic and agricultural benefits too. First of all, I'm going to do a very short 10-minute presentation just to set the scene, just to get us to refocus on the global agenda. And then we have short presentations from our speakers, 5 minutes, for them to present the key messages before we have a very lively discussion animated by Philip. Anyway, thank you. If I can have my first slide, please. I don't know how to change it. There is no clicker. Is there a clicker? Okay, sorry. That's all right. As we all know, we've been focusing on the health benefits of fruit and vegetable consumption. But we also know that agriculture and food systems have huge impacts on the environment. Agriculture is a main producer of greenhouse gas emissions, especially animal-sourced foods, paddy, rice, fertilizers. But also, we've got to think of the other environmental disbenefits. Water use in agriculture is enormous. About 70% of global water use is used for agriculture. Obviously, certain agricultural practices have led to soil degradation and erosion, which has led to various problems through climate change. And then these impacts have the land use change has large impacts on habitat loss and loss of biodiversity, much of which has been attributed to agriculture too. So that's the negative. Lots more. So what we want to focus on is not the negative, but thinking about sustainable diets. And those are not just those with low environmental impacts, contributing to food security and to healthy life, but they're also culturally accessible, acceptable, and economically fair and affordable, nutritionally adequate, safe, and healthy. And this is what we want to focus on, is the co-benefits that we can have, not just for the health, but for the environment and economics as well. And the good news, and this has been referred to earlier by one of the speakers, is that actually, if we can change dietary patterns in the way we want to more healthy diets, these are also have benefits for greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and water use. There's been lots of studies. This is a systematic review of 14 studies, reducing from a normal current dietary patterns to the top bar is sort of WHO guidelines, and the second bar is a vegetarian diet. And basically, if the systematic review showed if we can change to these more sustainable diets, we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 70 to 80%, and also we could reduce, say, water use by 50%. And those predictions are proportionate to a decrease in the animal-based foods and have concomitant benefits for health. This slide was from one of my colleagues at London School of Hygiene, Rosie Green, and a project she leads called the Chefs Project. And they have been modelling what would happen by optimising diets for both health and greenhouse gas emissions. So it showed that basically, if you can, the current diet is the blue bar. The healthy diet is those that meet WHO healthy dietary guidelines, and the light blue bar is if you could reduce the diet also by reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 60%. So if you can optimize a diet for both health and greenhouse gas emissions, which is the light blue bar, basically that is going to only be achieved by reductions of animal source foods. So red meat, dairy, and other unhealthy foods like soft drinks. But it's going to increase cereals, vegetables, and pulses, and to an extent fruit. So if we're going to be working towards health and environmental co-benefits, a healthy, sustainable diet is one, we all know, that's high in fruit and vegetables. And that in itself would result in 17% lower greenhouse gas emissions. And 7 million, they estimated through this study alone, 7 million life years saved over 30 years. But equally, if we could optimize a diet so that it was even more sustainable to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we can have additional health benefits up to 50% lower greenhouse gas emissions. This study, though, and other studies have warned that the acceptability has got to be balanced with the benefits, because there comes a point where, although we are all keen on increasing fruit and vegetable consumption, there are many diets and many cultures where this is not going to be possible. But basically, this and many studies have showed that there are co-benefits that can be achieved that are going to benefit all of us. Earlier, one of our colleagues referred to the fact that actually the green revolution in agriculture has been very successful in increasing production. We all know there's enough calories in the world. We know that potentially we could feed everyone in the world and there should be no food insecurity. But equally, all know that these benefits aren't distributed equally. There are large parts of the world where they have unhealthier diets. And these, if you look at the global burden of disease, it's particularly true also for fruit and vegetable consumption. So we focus mostly these few days on Europe. But if you look at these slides, I've got one on percentage of total deaths due to low fruit and vegetable intake, and also one on morbidity, which will follow. These are from the Global Burden of Disease Study statistics from the International Health Metrics and Evaluation Center at the University of Washington. You can go online, you can look at your individual countries, and the data is there. But I just wanted to produce these diagrams to show you that the low fruit and vegetable intake is a worldwide problem. But in some countries, there is increased morbidity and mortality. So the inequalities are across the world, particularly in Asia. So that's the morbidity. That's from Dali's lost 100% per 100,000 due to low fruit and vegetable intake. So globally, we not only need to worry about low fruit and vegetable intake, but we need to also consider why, in some parts of the world, people are not able to eat fruit and vegetables. So we need to think of sometimes the solutions are the different solutions required in different countries in different parts of the world. At the moment, the inequalities in health are also, the environmental inequalities are paralleled. So there is one study that I was involved in. It's led by Salim Youssef at McMaster. The PURE study has done lots of work on lots of different conditions and lots of different things. But we used the Pure Study data to look at global fruit and vegetable availability, affordability, and consumption. Over 140,000 participants from 18 countries, both rural and urban communities, over 450 communities. So there was 4 low-income countries, 4 lower middle-income countries, 7 upper middle-income countries, and 3 high-income countries. You can see the list there. And this was the first global study to describe availability and affordability of fruit and veg across these communities in all regions comparatively. And it looked at the relative fruit and vegetable affordability and its effects on consumption. If you're interested in methods, there is a paper there. It's also listed in the reference under my name in the programme. But basically, it showed that the proportion of people unable to afford 5 portions of fruit and vegetable a day, so 3 veg and 2 fruits a day, increases dramatically as you go from high-income to low-income countries. As you can say, in the study, in high-income countries, most people in the study could afford the 5 portions a day, looking at their monthly household income. But however, that changed as you became progressively across the lower income spectrum. So the other interesting fact that we found is across rural and urban communities, across all of them, apart from in the high-income countries, rural populations were also urban populations were more able to afford fruit and vegetables compared to rural populations. So the study showed look at lots of things. It compared, as I say, it compared intake by food frequency questionnaires. It looked at monthly household income and monthly household spend on food. And it also looked at availability of fruit and vegetables conducted with a structured observational audit of the environment in each of those 450 communities. And that looked at the number of outlets selling fruit and vegetables, and those are both formal and informal outlets, the price and the availability, so the diversity. Basically, this study showed that, as we know, fruit and vegetable intake was lower than recommended in every one of these countries, but it was lower in the lower income countries. And we found that fruit and vegetable intake decreased everywhere as relative cost increased relative to their household monthly income. But the lowest income was in these low and lower middle income countries and was clearly linked to affordability. So what I'm challenging to you today with these slides and to the panel is for us to think beyond our own countries and beyond Europe to all the other countries in the world, because we have a problem with the effects of fruit and vegetable production and fruit and vegetable intake are unequally distributed around the world. So the solutions may differ. We have talked a lot about individual behaviour change, but we need to think about the wider determinants of fruit and vegetable consumption and how we can change fruit and vegetable consumption globally, not for just improving health, but for the environment and the economy. So we may want to consider a range of interventions, and this is just something I produced to kind of, you can have your own list of interventions or types of interventions. And we need to think about how we can come together as a range of stakeholders from multiple sectors to deliver these interventions. And I hope this sets the scene now for the panel and helping us come up with some of the solutions. Thank you. Unfortunately, Angelique Delahaye, the member of the European Parliament, can't be with us today, but she has sent a video presentation, which we are now going to hear from, and then afterwards we will hand over to Phil, and he will introduce the rest of the speakers. Thank you.